to Pendleton, I guess it was in, let's see, that was probably the later part of July. And we hung around there for a couple of weeks. And then we got on a boat called the Benson and headed to Japan. We didn't know what we were going to do, you know, but we weren't told. So we got to Japan, Kobe, we went to a place called Atsu, and we were over there running around the hills. Well, then, next thing we knew, it was about September the 10th in that neighborhood. We left and got on an LST. Now, LST is a flat bottom boat, and it'll rock and dry dock. That's my opinion. So, going to Korea, we ran into a typhoon in that darn LST. I'm telling you, that thing was rocking and rolling, and equipment on the top of the deck broke loose, and they just cut it loose and let it go overboard, because if they hadn't, board the boat up, you know. But then we landed at Inchon on September the 15th in 1950. And over there was a tide of 30 feet. So we landed in the evening. The next morning, that whole bay was nothing but a mud flat. The LSTs were sitting on the bottom, and we were on this hill off to the right. But when we landed, we had to go up a wall. So we were building these ladders. What do we need ladders for? When we got there, we knew why. Because we were in LVTs, and they go out the bow of an LST, and you go like that, and you go under the water almost temporarily, and you pop back up. But then we landed. But anyhow, that was very, very interesting. The 5th Marines landed in the early of the morning and took an island called Wonsan. And so they took that. And that night, I was with a guy that was buried in a foxhole during the Second World War. He dug all night long. And he said, I ain't gonna get buried again. His name was Prouse. Funny old guy, but very interesting. So then, after that, like I say, we jumped off the next day, and my regimental commander was Chesty Puller. And so that was September the 15th. On the 18th, we came under a horrendous mortar attack. A friend of mine got completely blind, a guy named Bill Tyson from Ohio. And I got shrapnel in my shin and knee. And I was only in the hospital about 5 or 6 days. Then I went back to the front lines. And so my friend, Bill Tyson, he was from Akron, Ohio. And so, of course, he got that. And then when I got back, we were up on the Han River, getting ready to go into Seoul, Korea. And we went to a place called Yeongdong-po, which was the outskirts of Seoul. And they had these underpasses where the bridges were higher for the railroad tracks. They had taken and made these big sandbags and covered the hole, so you had to go over the top. Well, this guy Prouse I was talking about, he was going over and got shot in the rear end with a machine gun when he crawled across that railroad track. He said, man, I'm going home. He said he loved that one. But anyway, and that fighting in Seoul, Korea, the first person we got killed in Seoul was a guy named Henderson from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And so we had a lot of that day we had the mortar attack. Our company alone lost about 15 guys from the shrapnel. And so a lot of them we got to go back. But anyway, that was one heck of a trip. And they found a dummy that was doing the observing and giving the mortar shots. He was hiding in a shack behind us. So he was giving them coordinates. Well, they caught him. But anyhow, then once we took Seoul, we were up in the hill, like where they schooled, and the Missouri was in Inchon, shooting a 16-inch gun. We could hear them projectiles going over top of us. I mean, them suckers that big around. And we could hear them coming. And they were slowing down then because that's about 20 miles away. But that was very interesting. And we used to play tricks with hand grenades. You screw the top off and dump the powder out. And then you put it back on, and you sit there and fiddle around. Hey, man, don't do that. Oh, what, you know, watch this, man. I pull a pin, you drop it in the truck, everybody jumps out of the truck. So they didn't think it was funny. But we were, when we finally got Seoul, we were coming out of Seoul. And the Army had built a pontoon bridge. Well, these Army guys were giving us a bunch of lip, right? So I had one of them hand grenades. So I pulled that thing out, dropped it over in their boat, and they jumped overboard. Well, the next thing you know, we were under the gun big time. They were trying to figure out who threw that hand grenade in there. Some Army colonel told a major of ours to find out who did it. Well, they never squealed on me. So as time went by, in 1994, we had a reunion in Washington, D.C. And there's a guy that was a major, became a brigadier general. His name was Ed Simmons. So he was talking about, when we were in Seoul one time, we were coming out and somebody threw a hand grenade in the boat and made the guy jump overboard. I never did find out who did it, so I raised my hand up. I said, hey, General Simmons, I can tell you who did it. It was me. And he said, oh my God. So he found out eventually who did it, but I never got in trouble. And once we left Seoul, we got on the LSTs again and went around the bottom and went to a place called Wonsan. Excuse me. And they were sweeping the area for mines. So we did what they call yo-yo operation, back and forth up the coast, back and forth. And this was in like October. And once they did that, we got in trucks and went about halfway between Wonsan and Seoul, a place called Maginot. And we stayed there, and we were capturing like the North Koreans that had got caught from the invasion, you know, and they were all trying to go back north. So we sat up there for over a month, and we captured about 1,600 North Koreans. But we had one company, George Company. Every time they went out, they got ambushed. So we'd have to go bail them out. But this friend of mine, in the north, they built houses, and then around the perimeter, they put these reeds up to help, you know, block the wind. So this friend of mine, a guy named Ray Seville, he saw some feet in them, behind them reeds. So he goes over and he kicks it off, and there's a North Korean sitting there with a Burp gun. I could see his face just rain blood, right? But the guy was dead. He had been wounded, and he got over there and just sat down and died right there. But I'll tell you, man, that was a shocking thing. Yeah, I mean, you could see the expression on his face. We were in Maginot, and we were there about a month, and all we had was sea rations. The Army relieves us. We only had a battalion. They come up here with a regiment. The first morning, they're over there having pancakes. I said, man, get out of Dodge. I jumped out of the truck. I went over there. And I said, hey, I'm getting in the front of line. Give me some pancakes. The mistake I made when I get ready to go back in the truck, I said, hey, hold these pancakes when I get in the truck. I had 6, I got 1. It's okay. But then that's when we headed up to the Chosin Reservoir. And that was probably, maybe in November, probably roughly around the 20th in that neighborhood. But we got on trucks and we went up. And up there, it's about a 5,000 foot elevation, and it was starting to get chilly. And the very top of the road, now this road was they're so primitive over there, it was ridiculous. The road was just big enough to drive. So we took dozers and they cut out places so they could pass, you know. And so we got up there, it was November, probably around the 26th in that neighborhood. And it getting cold, started snowing. And we went to a place called Hageroo, which was division headquarters. Excuse me. And O.P. Smith was our commanding general at the time. And so they were building the airstrip up there at elevation 5,000 feet. So when it did, it had gotten so cold, the ground was frozen about, a foot and a half. So anybody what C4 is? But we got the engineers to dig a little bitty hole and put that C4 in there, and then blew a hole. And then dig underneath for your foxholes. But that was good, But it started snowing like crazy. Temperature was minus 25 at nighttime, 30. And a friend of mine named Oddie Shelton from Lynchburg is the guy who was building the airstrip. And when they were doing that, the Chinese were sniping at them. And they'd have to stop, and things like that. But the airstrip only was about 2,300 feet long. And anybody knows about density altitude, the higher you get, the thinner the air is. Therefore, it takes longer to get an aircraft airborne. So anyway, we were there, and they were working on that, and we had set up the CP. There was only 2 companies there at the time. Supposed to be 3, but the other company was still at Coterie with Chester Fuller. So that was the guy named, the CO of that was Carl Sitter, and also they had the 41st Commandos who was there, and that was a guy by the name of Drysdale. And so they were coming from Coterie to Hageroo to help us out, but before they ever got there, they started to attack. The Chinese entered the war, and they attacked only at nighttime. Because during the day, we had those Corsairs flying around, and they catch them in the open, and they had 6 50 caliber machine guns on those wings, and they would put a hurting on you in a heartbeat. So they would attack at night. Now the first time that they did it, at the top of the mountain was Coterie. We had that was Chester Fuller Regimental. Hageroo was the division headquarters. Then the next one was Tupton Pass, which was Fox Company. And then further on was 2 regiments, the 5th and the 7th. And that was Litzenberg and Murray, and they were up there holding the ground. Now the east of the reservoir was an army, two battalions they had over there. And the guy who was a CO was a guy named McLean, and he just disappeared. They never knew what happened to him. And so the other guy by the name of Don Fay took over. Well, on November the 27th, I believe it was, the Chinese had surrounded every one of these positions we had. And they all attacked at one time, at nighttime only. And they hit everybody. And the first night, I was with a guy named Thornton. We ran out and jumped in this ditch and had a bunch of rotten potatoes in it. And we were in there all night long, of course, shooting the Chinese or whatever. But that night, the next day in the morning, we counted 240 dead Chinese in front of our lines. Now, Item Company was next. I don't know how many they had, but we only had 2 companies. And there was a place called East Hill, which is a high ground, and the Chinese had taken that. So our regimental, our battalion executive officer got cooked, anybody he could get, and try to retake that hill because George Company and the 41st Commandos hadn't got there yet to help us. So they had to use anybody they could. And so that night, like a seesaw. The Chinese had it, and then we had it. The Chinese had it, we had it. And the problem was going up in Durn Hill, it's so slippery because the ground was frozen, they would keep sliding, you know. And one time a guy up at the top, once they took it and the Chinese took it back, and he was like hidden, and he was talking on the radio real slow, telling what was going on up there. And he stayed up there all night long by himself, talking to the guys below, telling them what's going on. So that would happen all night long. They attacked about 10 o'clock, all night. And so like I say, they hit every single position we had. And the Army on the east side of the reservoir, they got almost wiped out because they had lost all their officers. And so they were just kind of falling apart. But the sad part about that, they had truckloads of wounded soldiers. And the Chinese would throw gas in there and set them on fire. And this guy who was Don Faith, who was with them, he ended up died. He got wounded, but he got the Medal of Honor for what he did up there. And you know, there were 17 Medal of Honors given in that particular battle. Our regimental, the CO of our battalion and executive officer was Reginald Myers. And he had taken those go up the hill, and he got the Medal of Honor for doing that. Then Carl Sitter, who was with George Company coming from Coterie to Hagaroo, in between they got ambushed. And they lost a whole lot of guys, and he ended up going over there and getting on that hill. He got the Medal of Honor. And the guy at Tuckton Pass with Captain Barber, and he got the Medal of Honor for doing what he did. And this friend of mine, a guy named Hector Caparetta, he never been to boot camp. He was from New Jersey. And he was up there with his friend called Benson. And he ran out of ammunition. He's up there with his trenching tool hitting the Chinese like a baseball bat. And see, he ended up getting the Medal of Honor. And Benson got wounded, and he was shot in the legs, and he was kind of hiding behind a rock. And so he was helping, telling Hector, here comes another one, here comes another one. You know, like that. So they did that all night long. And then that one thing quieted out. And it was, oh man, it was getting real. We had snow, probably about 18 inches at least. And we had a portable kitchen, okay? That looked like a sieve the next morning. I mean, nothing but holes all over that thing. And the Chinese, you know, had green tracers and we had red. So that looked like 4th of July out there at nighttime. And they broke through our line through the 3rd platoon. And but they got some reserve, or what they call reserve in the back. They were in the back. They came and pushed the Chinese back out. But the guy next to us, which is the item company, that was the guy, first lieutenant, his name was Fisher. He was the CO over there. And I don't know how many they shot, same thing. But if you're familiar with artillery, we were firing at the Chinese at point blank, which is a flat out. And 105 howitzer, right? But what they do sometimes, in there they'll put like nails and stuff into the and fire. It's like shrapnel. And that's what they did too. And so then, that's the next day, the same thing, every night, and night after night. And then Fox Company, who held Tuckton Pass, if they hadn't done that, the honeymoon would have been over, because they held out the Chinese over there for 5 nights. Every night they got attacked, and we did too. But the 5th and 7th regiments at U Dam Knee, they got clobbered up there, but like we did. The first night we probably lost maybe 18 killed and a lot wounded. everything every night. So that was it. We lost, and it got so cold, like almost close to 50 below zero. And a lot of people got frostbite if you didn't pay attention to what you're supposed to do. And snow, snow, snow. I still like snow. But anyhow, the battle has gone down in history as one of the fiercest fought battles in military history.